We good? So what's that mean?
We got to start all over.
People could see it.
So they hear us talk, but they don't hear us.
No, they didn't have anything because I wasn't streaming it. So just now.
So start over?
Yep. Yeah, it just said we're on. Okay, let's
So
try
we're-
this again.
We're back to the turnovers.
Yes.
So, we start out the game defensively and cause a couple turnovers and generate momentum, and we got points out of both of them, leading the game 13-0, and seemed like Catoosa's a little bit shell-shocked, and they're coming into the game with not a win at the time and things, and we feel like we're in commanding lead as far as momentum in the football game, and then we were, the big swing was when the score was 13-3, and Clay sustained his injury as far as knocking himself out. So, just basic tackle and some technique things that he's going to have to work on as an individual, because that's a self-inflicted injury basically is what happened with him, and the angle of the way he's holding his head on that particular play. And went out there and I said, good thing about knowing Clay and the experience I have with him as far as how dedicated he is to the school and the program, and being able to spend so much time with him, I kind of know his body language, his characteristics as far as just how he operates on a daily basis. And once he came to and was responsive, I knew right then, as far as some of his movements and things, that he was going to be all right. I secured, his parents are obviously in panic mode, taking it really well, but I just felt 99% that Clay was going to be fine after that. A lot of that stuff's, neck injury is obviously a big deal.
Right.
And, a lot of that stuff, and it shocks your kids to have to see him get carted off on that. But I felt like the momentum shifted, at that time in the game, just being the fact that our kids had to witness that. And Catoosa had some quick success after that as far as getting more points on the board. I felt like, that situation there dictated a lot of what happened throughout the rest of the game.
Yeah, and like I said before when I didn't have us on, in the booth, we were saying the same thing. We thought that it kind of sucked the wind out of the team to see Clay getting carted off like that, and not knowing. You knew his characteristics, you knew what was going on, but in their mind, that's their.
Well, the worst case scenario is what you go to.
Right.
So, but
and so Clay, kind of go through that part for you there when that play happened and what you remember.
I remember everything up until the hit, and then right after when I woke up. But when I first woke up, I was scared. But after I could feel everything and I knew everything was all right, I was fine. They asked me who the president was, and I told them Trump, and kind of yelled at him, and then everybody started laughing, so it was all right.
But I know that the fans in the stands, the coaches, the players, and a lot of people at home that were watching were pretty concerned about you in that situation.
You can't, as far as an opponent and things, you can't say enough about the way Catoosa handled the situation.
Absolutely.
As far as medical staff and coaches, administration, and even the fan base, for that matter.
Right.
Very professional and very concerned about the whole situation, understanding that, there's more than what the football game was dictating.
Yes. And all the players from both teams came together. The cheerleaders came together, prayed for you. I know you probably saw the pictures of that afterwards and stuff. It was a really great moment.
Yeah, it was.
To see that, even though it was at your expense that night, but it was good to see that even in the heat of battle and the heat of competition, that people are still people.
Oh, yeah.
And there was a lot of people praying for you that night, and I'm glad that it turned out okay. As far as us on the air, we kept in contact with your dad. He was kind of filling us in what was going on. I was asking his permission to tell people on the air. I didn't want to say anything that didn't need to be said without their permission, but he was letting us keep people up to date on the air. So we were glad that you came out of that okay. You had to set a game the next game, right, which probably wasn't a bad idea.
Well, that was just it was just a tough situation and something that he didn't need to bounce back off, too quickly.
Yeah.
But it was a smart decision on everybody's part.
Yeah. And then after Clay gets knocked out of the game, we go into halftime. We still have the lead. But we come out in the second half, and we see Catoosa kind of change their game plan, at least from our eyes. Right. I don't know about from the coaching staff, but it seemed like they started running the ball at the middle.
Yeah, we just didn't have an answer. We didn't tackle very well. And like I said, a lot of that goes back to the way you, just the way you present yourself, the way you attack the game as far as defensively. And it was like the tide had switched. We were the less aggressive team at that point. We weren't flying to the football like we was the first quarter, and it dictated the way the outcome of the game came because, obviously the aggressive team in football most of the time is going to win, and
Right.
we felt like we were the aggressor rather than the aggressor, and that's how they took over the football game.
Right. And, going back to what you just said there, that very first ball game we played against Claremore Sequoia, and I came to you after the game and I told you that's probably the most aggressive I'd seen our defensive play in 10 years. And I haven't seen it out of them since. I'm not, if they play that aggressive, then, as a unit.
Right.
I've
Yeah.
seen guys that are still playing at that, but as a unit. And I haven't seen it since. And, losing ball games by a touchdown, being aggressive on defense is going to get you that touchdown.
Yep.
So ended up and for us in the booth when we were talking about the fact they were running off the ball at the middle like that, and I don't know about what you think here, but do you think that was part of because Clay wasn't in the middle anymore?
Well,
Right down
obviously
the line.
not having him, a two-way starter out there is going to be affecting him in a negative way. But just our whole mentality as far as how we're going to play the game, it seems like we played a step slow that second half.
Right.
I think, part of it contributes to the injury, and part of it contributes to, we haven't won a lot of games here, and that's just about teaching ourselves how to win.
Yeah.
We have, football's such a momentum game, and momentum's such a huge thing as far as taking advantage of somebody. When we're up, 2 scores, you go ahead and make it 3 scores, they go ahead and fold.
Right.
And we never could get that third touchdown lead or whatever, especially to a team that hadn't been successful yet this year.
Right.
And they're still kind of in some uncharted territory for their kids because they've been such a winning program for so long, and they're kind of down this year as well. So it's going to take time. It's very frustrating right now because our kids have been in 4 ball games that we feel like we should have won, all 4 of them.
Right.
They're very winnable games, and we could be sitting here talking tonight being 5-2 instead we're 1-6, and frustrated with the game right now. But really, it's got to start somewhere, and as a staff, we look at ourselves and wonder what we can do better each week to prepare the kids better. And one of the things is just becoming winners. As far as it's not necessarily the X's and O's all the time, because a lot of times we go back and watch film and criticize ourselves and play calling and this and that, but a lot of times we're there to make plays, we're just not making.
Right.
And it's going to come. We're not ever giving up on these kids. Like I said, you can get frustrated as you want, but it's not going to fix anything.
Right.
So we knew going into this, and the staff, and I feel like that we're solid as far as taking care of the right things and focused on the right things. That these kids, they've been turned over too many times, and they don't really know what expectations are. Like I said, the wins and losses become frustrating, but the reality of life is, if you've had turnover so many times and nobody believes in you, how do you expect to believe in yourself?
Right.
So I think just consistency is what these kids need, and the community has given that as far as support week in and week out, but they haven't had that as far as a close-knit staff that get it, and that know that they're going to be there next year.
Right.
We just turned over 2 coaches on staff last year, and hopefully none this year.
Right.
And I think that's going to, make big things happen in the future.
We were talking about that the other night. I can't remember who I was talking to, but we were trying to count how many head coaches have been here since Bob Homer left. Bob Homer was here for a long stretch, 20 years or so. I'm give or take a year or 2 there, but long time for a football coach to be in a place. And best we could figure since he had left, there'd been 8 or 9 head coaches here. That's just too many.
Right.
It's too
Especially
many.
in the short area of 1-year stints, 2-year stints right there, and like I said, hopefully we don't mess up too bad where we have to exit too early. But we're gonna do the right things. These coaches, I commended them. Even on the tough loss versus Wagner. Not having Clay and having a few game time injuries that we weren't prepared for to happen, having to throw out our freshman quarterback there early in the game, and him not even taking, my fault, but he hadn't even taken a snap that week in preparation for Wagner, just because of the fact the domino effect is really Revis was our backup quarterback, but he sustained an ankle injury, so there wasn't any reason to put him back there because he wasn't mobile.
Right.
So it's just tough to throw a freshman out against Wagner in that situation, but I felt like we got a lot out of, moving on to Wagner. I feel like we got a lot out of Carson Jinks that night, just as far as competitive edge and wanting to do well in the situation.
But that night we gave Carson co-offensive player of the game from us. So of course, from us it doesn't really mean nothing.
It's kind of like ESPN.
We just got to pick who we think. And that night Gavin gets knocked out of the game, has to take a trip to the hospital, for the concussion deal. And here comes Carson. And at the time when we gave him the player of the game, the co-offensive player of the game, we didn't know that he hadn't taken a snap during the week. Found that out later. But he came in the game as a freshman against arguably one of the best teams in the state,
Right.
in all classes. And he didn't do anything to hurt us.
No, he didn't panic. He competed.
And that was why he got offensive player of the game. I mean, really, we didn't have anybody that did anything real spectacular that night on the offensive side of the
Right.
ball, but he come in a tough situation. Like I said, not taking any snaps in preparation made it even better, because he just didn't do anything to hurt us. He came in, he took the snaps, and of course Clay was out that game, so you had a guy that hadn't taken very many snaps at center with a guy that hadn't taken any snaps at quarterback.
A lot of things have a domino effect too. Clay's not only starting tackle and starting center, but he's also a deep snapper.
Right.
Well, with people not knowing the situation, Gavin's our next deep snapper.
Right.
Well, Gavin gets knocked out, so then who do we go to? We're having to punt a lot in those situations.
Right.
So then we resulted to shotgun punt, and Carson was responsible for punting the ball a lot as quarterback position. So, when we lose one or two guys, it's not like losing one or two guys. It's like losing 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 because they play so many roles on our football team.
But we thought Carson did well that night. We thought Thornberry did well that night.
Yeah, he busted one late finally. That's who scored for us.
And defensively, I can't remember who got defense on that one.
But,
maybe Tanner Maple. But
good possibility. He's played pretty well for us defensively.
But we also lost Horn that night.
Yeah, on a cheap pillback block that should have been an injection.
Yeah.
That's why I was out halfway on the field arguing, because they administered the penalty correctly, but the kid, they had let him get by with some stuff early in the game too, as far as some comments that he'd made that shouldn't be made, and they just kind of warned him. But that was an obvious what you call targeting on that particular play with Horn.
Well, I saw a couple plays in that game that stood out to me. One was when Gavin got hit and his head hits the turf. It was a late hit on him. The referee did not throw the flag, but he went over and talked to the kid that hit him late. To me, I'm like, I understand trying to help teach a kid, but in that instance, it was a late hit. You got to throw that flag.
For lack of better terms, and obviously the score's not going to be much different. Not to blame it on them, but that crew's pathetic.
Yeah.
We've had them a couple times this year, and they shouldn't maybe play some. I mean, I'm not even for sure if they're educated enough to call some junior high football, but they're not very good.
Right. And so they had that hit where they went and talked to the guy. Right. Then they had the pillback block where they did, give the penalty.
And then we had we're jogging off to halftime, and he's apologizing, saying he missed the call and this and that. And I said, you're not doing me any good with my kids right now, getting hauled to the hospital. I said, that's not helping the situation. Well, then they come back out the second half, and then they're flag happy.
Right.
After the game's already been determined and it's already a blowout, now we're going to see how many flags we can throw.
Right.
And that's not helping the situation either.
Yeah, they put those penalties and ejections and all that in to help keep the kids safe.
Right.
And you got 2 kids at the hospital, they weren't being kept safe.
Right.
And those guys are the ones that control that.
Exactly.
I know that you try not to be too hard on those guys because you have to deal with them week in and week out and stuff, but sometimes you have to call it like it is.
When they're messing with the livelihood of your kids, I'm gonna go to battle for them. And 15-yard penalty, whatever it is, I'm gonna get my point across, because like I said, nothing trumps the safety of our kids.
Right. And that night when you went out, I thought, this is it. He's getting ready to get tossed, because I knew that you were going out there for that exact reason, because you wanted to help protect your kids. And in a ball game like that, I mean, it got out of hand in a hurry.
Yeah.
The type of team they are, they smell blood in the water and they go for it.
Yeah, and that's a winning tradition that they've had. The only thing I didn't appreciate is the last score. I mean, I felt like when they went and scored 69, I thought that was just a bad job by our defense to not tackling a kid that was faster than us. And
Right.
He went 80 yards, but when they get near to the minute mark of the football game and they're trying to hurry up and run a wildcat play to score one more time to make it 76, I was pretty frustrated for
Right.
our kids because, I mean, they didn't need to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. No. There's that fine line there to where you're beating a team, and you're beating a team bad, and then you're trying to demoralize the team.
Right.
And I think when you get to that point, you need to stop and check yourself a little bit.
Right.
They could have very easily took 4 knees right there,
Right.
and even if they gave the ball back to you,
I don't even
with
know if
some
they
time
needed
left,
to do that with the time.
you know.
I mean, we weren't going to call timeout. We've had our fair share of losses. We understand if they're doing it correctly and winning
Right.
with class, or if they're,
right? And I always go back to that game where OU played Kansas, and Samaj P. Ryan ran wild on them and set the NCAA record and all that day, and he breaks one, and he's nothing in front of him but grass to the end zone. He gets to the 1 yard line and takes a knee. Nobody around him. But he did that so he wouldn't score on him again.
right.
And he could have very easily just scored that touchdown and been done, but he took a knee at the 1. So sometimes I think you got to let class come in front
Yeah.
of scoring a touchdown, especially when you're up that big.
Yeah, no, and another thing is to get beat that bad was we just have to get better.
Yeah.
I mean, one of these days we want to be able to compete against Wagner and beat Wagner and things, and we just can't sit here and have pity parties for ourselves and
Yeah.
expect that to happen too. So, I mean, part of that score is obviously, I mean, the majority of it's our fault. Our kids and our staff and stuff take full responsibility, but we don't need to be demoralized as far as like you said.
Right. And I believe that with the staff we have in place, with the leadership we have in place, with the investments that's been made, like here in the weight room, that the kids coming and the kids buying in. I think one of these days we're going to be competing with Wagner pretty good.
Yeah,
I think in this conference it's going to be them and us.
it's just accountability. I mean, like you said, with the turnover thing, with the coaching and the things, the expectations. Some of these upper classes haven't been held accountable. So it's almost like when you call them out on something when workouts aren't completed, they take it personal because they've never been held accountable. So they don't understand accountability. They think when they're completing a workout that they're doing extra, and that's not. That's the base. That's the baseline of what we're going to do today. You want to do extra, you can stay after.
Right.
And we haven't quite got that clicking yet in some of our upper classes, and I feel like some of the lower classes, especially at the middle school, they know expectations because all they've known is what this staff's presented to them.
Right.
And they've bought in fully and things. So I mean that's what we're going after. And some people get it, some people don't. Some people wish us bad luck and so on and so forth. But the people that I answer to on a daily basis here at the school, the way our staff's employed and the way they've backed us, I feel like it's going in the right direction. I'm frustrated too because, like I said, we could be talking tonight, be 5-2, and
Right.
Everybody's yippity skippity, but we're facing the 8 ball right now, and we're sitting here 1-6, and we're trying to find another win, and we don't have an easy game left, and we're pretty banged up this week going
Right.
into Oologah. It's tough. Seems like winning breeds success, losing brings some other things with it, and right now we have a couple serious injuries that some kids are battling, and then we have some kids that maybe could play, maybe not, but situationally 1-6 and going to Oologah this week isn't too favorable.
Right. Yeah, Oologah traditionally a tough team, big up front, likes to run the ball, likes to pound the ball. They can air it out if they need to. But I mean, traditionally, I don't know what they are this year, but traditionally they're a run it down your throat kind of team.
Yeah, I mean they're not as good up front as what they have been in the past, but they graduated some main guys up front, but skill wise they're still pretty loaded, especially in the backfield, quarterback, and some of the running back game. But it's just their kids right now are thirsty for a win as well. They've only beat McLean in the district right now, and they've got 3 more district games, and us being one of them. So hopefully we come out with the right attitude and at least give ourselves a chance. Because I feel like a couple of weeks ago we go into Wagner and we don't give ourselves a chance mentally. We're beat before we show up to the field, and the score shows it basically.
Yeah, I agree. And that's what I have said to people before about the War Dog Kings back in the 80s, which is where I was in school. time ago, Clay, 30 years ago. But when those teams got off the bus, they believed they could win. No matter who they're playing, and that's where we got to get to again. We got to get off the bus believing that we can win. We've got to get off the bus, and the other team knows they're getting ready to be in a fight.
Yeah.
They're not going to get anything easy. Whether it be Wagner, of course, back then we were playing Tulsa Kelly and some of them schools that are 6A schools now, or 5A. But Claremore was one of them that we played that was a rival. But you got to get off the bus, and not only they know they're getting ready to be in a game, but you know that you have a chance to win one. What was going on there?
But moving on from Wagner to McLean, I mean that's another one that we know that we lost. That should have been one. And situationally, we prepared with Carson all week as far as what kind of scheme we're going to tackle with, and I feel like offensively, we stopped ourselves just on turnovers alone. Talked to Jim Ellis today. I believe he said something about see if I can find it. He said something brought up to him that we hadn't even punted in that game. In a situation where they should have had a punt, but our defense had a breakdown. But he said something here. He said he looked up the game between us and McLean, and he said fifth time in the game, no punts, going back to 1941.
We didn't punt.
We didn't punt the ball, and they didn't punt the ball. So
I didn't realize that.
I said offensively, we stopped ourselves by turning the ball over, and I feel like a crucial point in the game was just me as the play caller. Is we get somewhat first and goal there on our second drive, and Carson has the receiver open in the end zone, but they hadn't stopped our running game yet, and he underthrew the ball. Told him he's not there, throw it out the back of the end zone. Well, I guess his inexperience and just the situation was too much for him, but he underthrew the pass, and it was picked off for a touchback.
Right.
Well, next play from scrimmage for them, the quarterback was 80 for a touchdown, and that was just huge.
Yes.
Shift, and then that's part of the second quarter, giving up 18 points right now, and kind of giving ourselves too big a mountain to overcome as far as getting back into the game too late, because offensively we turned the ball over, special teams handed to Coach Simpson the things that he was able to do that night, executing things with special teams. But Skyler Judd did a great job kicking the ball in location for us to recover it. But that's the only thing that the game versus McLean. It wasn't our offense.
Right.
It was special teams giving us more opportunities.
And the big play, like you said, the 80, and then another one I think it's probably 70.
No, yeah.
They had big plays,
to that.
and the defense was out there, it seemed like, for a long time. And that wears on those guys.
When we get them in a situation where you got to win those situations, and we lose them more times than not right now. But there's one thing that can happen to us, and right before halftime, there's 20 seconds on the clock. They've got to pass the football. They have no timeouts, and they're about on the 25-yard line. And we let them behind us in the end zone for a touchdown, and that put them up. I think at that time 21-7 or something like that. And right before half, then that was just a backbreaker right there.
I thought, did they call pass interference on that one?
Yeah, as well, but he caught the ball.
But from my angle, he double-handed shoved Jinx right in the back before he went up and caught that thing. When I saw the flag, I was excited because I thought it was offensive pass interference. And they called pass interference on
We
Jinx.
just can't put ourselves in situations right there to dictate the officials to have to make a decision. I mean, we got to put ourselves in better situations to win.
Yeah, I agree.
And we're not doing that right now. I mean, even the last play in the fourth quarter, as far as defense goes, before they take the knee, we got them 3rd and 13.
Yeah.
What are they going to do? We fall down and they convert a 15-yard completion. Game's over.
Yeah.
So we got a chance to get the ball back right there on 4th down, and that was a 4th down play. And another time they went for it on 4th down on their own end, on like the 20-yard line.
They scored on that.
Scoring that drive as well. They converted the 1st down. We tackled him for 20-some yard gain, and they go on and score on that drive. So
I think the biggest difference in that game that I saw was just their speed. If they got green grass in front of them, we could not catch them.
we just didn't tackle very well in space. I mean, I felt like we were waiting for expectations was my buddy was going to make the tackle and not me, instead of, like you said, back to week 1 when we had a lot of hats around the football.
Right.
A lot of standing around seemed like that night waiting to see what happened instead of going to make something happen.
Yeah, I'm telling you right now, if they played defense like they did game game one, you'd be 5-2 or 6-1 right now.
Yep.
If you guys play defense like you did week one.
Obviously, a lesser opponent, they're struggling too, but I just felt like the whole morale of the team, I can't tell you, injuries and things like that and losses, but, when they're having fun, the kids, football needs to be the greatest pastime, whether you win, lose, or draw. And right now, at times, the kids' mentality it's too much work. I mean, we've got to have an attitude adjustment for football to be fun and things to happen. We have to have the right mentality to go make things happen right now. And I feel like that we're just kind of, in a daze at times. And that's something that's got to be changed, as far as, practice and the way we prepare. And today, like I said, having a lot of these injuries and things, we've lost about 5 or 6 starters out this week. And that's tough to overcome when you're the underdog already and then you're missing 5 or 6 key guys. That's a tough one for football.
Yeah, the depth, we don't have the depth right now in a lot of those positions probably. I mean, I don't know what positions they are, but I mean, I know we're not very deep at a lot of positions.
Mm-hmm.
And so you get a starter out, that's going to hurt. And then now you get 6, that's really going to hurt, So with McLean, we saw the speed. Our offense, we moved the ball down the field, but then I think we had 3 turnovers in the red zone against McLean. And, you can't have those.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you get in the red zone, you got to score. Yeah, you got to get points and not turnovers. And
I think one time we had a missed field goal, which is not typical for Skyler. A little bit of adjustment on Holder now is Jinx, and they haven't had the chemistry that him and Gavin's had. And I think he made the first one and missed the second one, possibly.
I think he hit the second one to the left,
Yeah.
wasn't he?
So, there's some points that we gave up, and then, like you said, we turned the ball over on an interception one time, a couple fumbles on the others. So that was big.
Yeah, and Throneberry ran pretty good in that game as well. But I think, did he fumble?
No, he possibly did, but I know Jinx and Maple did.
And I know that McLean was really going after the ball. I mean, they were
Well,
trying
he
to
didn't
strip
do a
that
very
thing
good
out.
job. Like I said, some inexperience with Carson not carrying in an varsity game. Some things that he's doing that we worked on this week in practice, but we've got to carry the ball away from the defense instead of to the defense. And a lot of that stuff is it's very physical play inside where he's having to run. He's just not accustomed to it at that level. And then Tanner, he gives us great bursts and things, but sometimes he gets lackadaisical with the ball as well and gets it away from his body. But some of the things that he does, you never can doubt Tanner's effort.
Absolutely.
Special team spark or offense or defense, he's giving us 100% when he can go. And, that's all you can ask out of the kid.
And you're right, he does have a burst for a guy his size. If he sees a hole, he can hit it pretty quick.
Yeah, he's exciting to watch, and just wish that he had more snaps in him, because when we use him so much defensively and depend on him, then we turn around and try to use him so much offensively. It's tough for a kid to have that much energy for that many consecutive plays.
Yep. So I just kind of picked up what you were saying there about Jinx and working stuff in practice. Is he going to be the starter this week as well?
Absolutely.
So is Gavin? I'm assuming Gavin's still out.
Right now, Gavin's still out.
Okay. I didn't know that until when I heard you saying that. I thought, oh, it feels like Jinx is going to start again. Well, you know what? He's the future, so he's going to have to get the experience somehow.
Right.
And
That's the thing that I want people to understand is we're not counting this team out by any means. We have 11 seniors on this team that we owe everything that we can give them these next 3 games. But probably honestly 3 or 4 of these seniors are banged up right now and they're battling through some things, and we're just trying to give the team the best, put us in the best situation to try to win a football game. And we're coaching these kids up like we're 7-0. I mean, we're trying to do our best. We're not giving up on anybody. We're not spending any less time over the weekend breaking down film or anything like that. That's the problem when you start, I guess, underachieving per se. Because by all means, as far as the staff's expectations is, we honestly feel like we should be 5-2 at least, at minimum. And we're harder on ourselves than other people are, but it's tough coming from from kids, community, and things like that. That people just don't get it with their negative comments. I mean, that's pretty tough and harsh at times. especially when you care about sometimes too much what people think. And I'll stand behind this staff 110% that they're giving their best effort, and I don't care what people say. The right people know what's going on here, and that's all that matters.
Yeah. You know, I told somebody the other day, if you can't see the difference in this year's team and the teams we've watched over the last 10 years, you probably need to go see Dr. McQuigg because you got eye problems. There's lots of good things happening. It's going to take some time,
Right.
you know. And
We met some kids from that last group that graduated too. That was some good leaders.
Right.
I mean, some really good kids that bought in for 1 year, and that's all they had to believe in. But we missed some of their leadership already. So,
Right.
you know, we'll expect a lot of things out of him next year, and he brings some things to the table. But right now, you know, expectation-wise, there's 11 guys in front of him that's supposed to be taking this lead role, and we don't really have that right now as far as just a vocal leader that you know, does it on and off the field out of that group right now, and he's having to fill some bigger shoes than maybe what he was ready for as a junior. But you know, him and Spinagle spend a lot of phenomenal time in here working and do what's asked of them, and as a coach, that's very pleasing to have kids that's willing to do, you know, more than what expectations might be. You know, those kids will reap the benefit one of these days.
But, you know, and I think we've talked about this before, that bad habits that are taught sometimes are hard to change. And you know, you get something instilled in you, and that this is the way it is, it's hard to come in and change it in a short time. And, you know, work ethic is something you're taught from a young age, in my opinion. And I know Clay's been taught that work ethic from his dad and his mom and his whole family, and that's carried him through this part of his life. It's probably going to carry him a lot further in life.
Oh yeah.
But you know, if you have that work ethic instilled in you, then you're going to do that in everything you do, and that's something that's got to be built. And you know, I know with our youth program, you know, I watched the different coaches. Of course, I was focused more on the first grade because that's who I was coaching this year. But you know, I see that happening at those different groups. The accountability, even at that young age, it's got to start there.
Yeah, it's got to start young, and it's got to be consistent. And that's why I feel like it's too hard to be too hard on some of these upperclassmen because it hasn't been consistent with them. They don't know what expectations when the coach is leaving every spring, and new guys either trying to move in or establish, you know, a home or whatever at this community. There's a lot of time that, you know, 2 or 3 months right now that these kids need to be growing as athletes that they're not even being overseen because there's so much turnover.
Right.
And all these other assistant coaches, their focus is a lot of times the sport that they're coaching at that time. We have several guys involved with track and baseball and other things too that, you know, they don't have the time to spend like, you know, we are right now as, you know, powerlifting and off season and things like that. So, you know, it's going to happen. You know, I don't have a timeline for when it's going to happen, but we do have some numbers and some talent coming. And, you know, if you're a true war dog right now, especially some of these kids that's in this high school program tonight, you know, the rest of their time this year, now's when you need to reach out and be a true war dog and stand behind these kids and give them the extra pat on the back, and then where encouragement goes a long way, because we're in a point of our season right now. It's a struggle to get them to compete at times because, you know, they face this adversity right now, year in and year out, and it's easier to do the opposite than what's expected of you right now, or easier to give up when expectations aren't there. So, you know, these kids right now, I can't say enough about some of them as far as their work ethic and their character, but we need more of that.
You know, I had a lady after the Wagner game on our Facebook page make a stupid post, not saying it as nice as I can. So she became the first ever person banned from Facebook page because she had zero clue what she was talking about. You know, I don't know why people would post something like that knowing that these kids are on our page reading stuff, and like I said, she had no idea what she was talking about. So I warned her and told her, hey, you know, you can't put stuff like that on this page. She says, I'm going to do what I want. That's fine. I run things here. Bye. Ban her. Because I'm not going to have it. Because, you know, they don't understand what they go through, what you go through every day to go out there and compete Friday. They don't know how you feel when you get up Saturday morning and you can't walk, or you got an arm that you can't really lift over your head. And I know these kids put in the time, they put in the effort, and for somebody like that probably doesn't even come to games. You probably just saw the score and decided to pop off. But support is what the kids need. Support is what the staff needs. Be in the stands. They see if the stands are full or not. They see the stands are half empty or if they're full.
The support they've got on a weekly basis, that's beside the point. I feel like that we're overly supported, and I try to preach to these kids it's time to give back to this community because the community's thirsty for success.
Yeah.
We've got to do the right thing, Monday through Friday to get that success to happen. And I don't feel like we're doing that as a unit consistently enough. I think individually we have some sparks right now, but as a unit and enough, I've been in this long enough. I've seen teams that work, and I've seen teams that haven't. And obviously, the ones that work is the ones that reap the benefit right now. And, we're not doing this. This is my expectations of this group is not enough people doing the right things on and off the field. We got to make some better choices on and off the field if we want to reap the benefit truly. We can talk about it. There's a lot more to do besides talk about it physically. We got to put in the work. And, like I said, I feel like that swings that one touchdown loss more times than not if we're making better decisions.
Absolutely. And, in those one touchdown games, one or two plays make a difference in that game. Just one or two, change the whole outcome of where you're standing right now. And that, I had somebody ask me how we were doing, and I said, the kids are doing great. We're not getting a win. We're losing close ball games. Games we're in, games we could have won, but one or two things don't go our way. A fumble here, or pass interception there, or penalty here, or we don't finish a drive here, miss a field goal, whatever it may be. We're just one or two plays away from getting those wins, and that's tough. And sometimes it's tough on the kids to keep that energy level up.
It is.
And that's where the community has to be there.
Yeah, and that's more support as far as encouraging word besides just from their mom and dad. It needs to be, somebody that's been a War Dog through and through and seen the ups and downs. That need these people to be reaching out right now. But as a staff right now, I'm not making any excuses for wins and losses, but they'll take care of themselves eventually, especially if we're deserving. But right now, what do we do with this group? We try to instill character like we have since day one. I was pleased. I've seen a lot of staffs go south when they see a 76-6 ball game and start pointing fingers at the kids and stuff. And I haven't seen that from the coaching's perspective at all. We've got to lead by example if we want these kids to see the future. If we want these kids to be successful citizens and things like that. It's more than just high school football. But we've got to establish the little things to make big things happen as far as the staff, and we've got to stay consistent with these kids and instill good character. I feel like, and that's got to be one of our focal points.
I'm gonna ask you a question. If you don't want to answer, don't. I had a lady ask me this. I didn't know the answer. I thought I'd ask you. Summer workouts. School's out, but we have summer workouts. Summer, what's it called? Summer performance. Is that mandatory for athletes?
No, not mandatory at all. As far as making a team or anything like that, that's mandatory for success.
Right.
And I feel like our numbers, honestly, out of our varsity level football this last summer, I would say we're only 50% participation. And out of those 50%, I would say probably 50% of the 50%, so you're talking 25% of the football teams actually doing expectations. And that's why we're not reaping the benefit right now. We honestly have some kids that we have to depend on down in and down out that was, either had a job or was too, distracted with other things right now in this 21st century than they were to get up and go do what the expectations were for the weekend. We're just talking 4 days a week.
Right.
And
That's in the morning, correct?
Yes. But I feel like that shows that, total opposite. We have more participation in 3 grades at the middle school than we do 4 grades at the high school.
Right.
And that don't add up, right?
Right. Well, that was her question is, she felt like it should be mandatory. As well, I don't know how that all works.
Stipulations we can instill as far as programs and success, absolutely. Mandatory to make a team, not necessarily.
Right. Okay. So with Ugaw, what are we looking at there? You said their skill guys are good. They're not quite as good up front.
Yeah, they're missing a few links up front that they've had. I mean, Coach Weeks does a good job. Took over the program last year as far as the interim coach, and came back and beat Wagner last year as a group.
They played Wagner pretty tough last week too, didn't they?
I believe it was about a 4-score football game.
But it ended up being 4-score. It was pretty close there for a while.
Yeah, but they'll battle. They've got some tough-nosed kids. Tradition football program, and right now they're trying to sneak in and make the playoffs due to that 4 seed right now. And they're obviously have to beat us and then 2 more to beat that team. And they're right there on the brink as far as what they're going to do with their season too. So
Right.
we just got to find a way to go compete, not count ourselves out before the 7 o'clock kickoff, and control the things that we can control as far as participation. Right now, like I said, we're facing the 8 ball with some of our starters, and it's tough, but it's also going to give some other kids some more opportunities that they might not typically get, and maybe they'll shine.
Yeah, and that's the thing. When somebody goes down, somebody's got to step up, and you may have a kid that has a game.
Right.
The deal.
So we hope for the best. We're prepared. Today was probably the first day that we've seen that much the injury report as far as the impact. We had a couple sustained injuries Tuesday's full padded practice, and then some stuff that carried over from last week's game that we did not really know about came to fruition today. So it was pretty hard. It was a tough day for War Dog football as far as practice preparation, especially for Wednesday's practice. You're trying to wrap things up, get the hay in the barn so we can go have fun on Friday. And it was pretty hard, and at least we had one day to prepare for it as far as knowing expectations. I think 1 or 2 of the kids are going to bounce back. Just simple things that can be taken care of, but possibility sideline a couple others as well.
I know you don't like to talk about those on the air, so we'll leave that till after the air, and I'll ask you who they are. All right, Clay. So how do you and the guys feel going into Ugaw this week?
Pretty good. I mean, missing the starters kind of put a dent in it, but like you said, they're not as good up front, but they are still. I mean, they're still pretty good. We've played more as a team. I feel like times we get individualized. Like you said, at week 1, we played as a team and we came out on top. I feel like we need to do that more.
Yep. Absolutely. Another note, I saw Jackson Satterwhite got a Division I offer this last week. That's pretty good.
That's a good start for him. I think once he starts getting a couple offers, it's going to have a domino effect on some others. Some people put a big question mark on him after not playing his whole junior season, and now they're just getting some of his senior film. So he's still coming out of the injury as far as don't have quite all of his strength back and stuff, but he's probably stronger now, honestly, than he was week 1.
Right. Yeah. So the offer was from Alcorn State.
Yeah.
Is that right? And then he also took a trip last week to visit Virginia Tech.
Yeah, that's a pretty neat experience. We're going to see a 6 overtime game.
Yeah. That's the place I saw some of the video. I think his mom took maybe, but that place was hopping.
Oh, yeah.
It was loud.
Man,
Yeah.
going off. It's quite the atmosphere. It's probably one of the greatest college atmospheres there is right now.
As the head coach there, Self Fuente. He used to be at
Texas too, and things being on OC and stuff.
Right. So, all right. Well, I think that's going to wrap us up for tonight. You got anything else, or
No, just
you good to go, Clay? You got anything?
wet next couple of days. Some very weather moving in.
Yeah, it's supposed to start. In fact, I got an alert a while ago that said it was supposed to start when I was in here, so it may be raining when we get outside. But
That's my bedtime on the run.
but anyway, so bring your rain suit if you when you come out Friday night. Don't miss it. Be there and get your rain suit out. And get out there and support the kids. And I know the rain. If it's raining, they have turf there, right?
Yes.
So, but rain still changes a lot of things.
Yeah.
Footing and ball handling and everything else. So, it could be a pretty interesting game. game if that's the case. Hopefully it'll break and not rain through the game. But
This will be a military night for them. They're deeming this as a military game, so supposed to be some different things going on as well. Possibility of our kids mixing in not pink but red for this military awareness deal they've got going on.
yeah, I actually talked to Chad Davis. I was in his office like right after he had that phone call or something from that guy, and they were wanting us to wear red jerseys
Yeah,
that night. And he said, "No, that's not going to happen.
right.
We can't wear red jerseys." So he said we can maybe accent with some red something, but he said we cannot wear red jerseys. And so he was trying to work it out, and work with the guy. Red jerseys were
It's
out
for
of the
a good
question.
cause and all, but it's short notice and stuff like that. It's for
Yeah.
preparation.
And plus when you're blue and your rival's red, you can't wear red. All right, so that's gonna wrap us up so we can get Coach to go to bed. It is almost 9:15. You go to bed by 9?
No,
No.
not so much.
No.
I like to wind down a little bit.
All right, guys. So we're gonna sound off for tonight, and we appreciate Clay for coming in. He was a little nervous at the beginning.
Oh yeah.
Nothing to it. Nothing to it. He did.
Clay's one of the hardest working kids at the varsity level right now. I'm really pleased with his effort.
He gets the work ethic from his mom. I heard.
It
And
has
his
to be.
toughness.
It
And
has
his
to be.
toughness. Yeah.
Definitely.
He says he'll be waiting on him very hard when he gets home. But Clay, we do appreciate you coming in and joining us, Coach. We appreciate you
Absolutely.
taking time out of your schedule to be here again tonight, and we'll do our best to be here next Wednesday. Things happen sometimes, so we got to work it out. But that's our plan as of now.
Senior night next week.
Next week, senior night. So this Friday night, travel to Ugal. Next Friday night, we're back at home with Cleveland coming to town, and then we travel to number 5, Bristow, to close things out. So 3-game stretch here. Get in the car, travel, be there for the kids, help support them, help close this thing out. And, I'd like to see 3 wins. I know you would too.
That'd be awesome.
But it's gonna be a tough stretch for the kids, but I think it's there. They can do this.
It's doable. I mean, especially next week's a more winnable game if we become more healthy as a team. But when we got time, we'll see who's able to play tomorrow, and we'll go from there.
All right, guys.